Morning, everyone. We are up to the 26th of November, so we are heading into the last part of our teaching process. Next week we've got the Chief Executive of the South Wales Police and Crime Commissioners team coming in to talk to us about key aspects of his role, and then we focus and we'll round off with citizens to the centre, community governance and potentials for the future of corporate governance in policing, but it's much, much wider than that. I've referred a number of times to the idea that some people argue for, that we should have Beveridge 2.0, that the time is right for us to have a complete overhaul of the infrastructure of public services based on that foundation that we saw so brilliantly come together in the 1940s after the 1942 Beveridge Report. Looking at how we amend what we've got today to make our services, policing, health, education, social services, benefit system, criminal justice system, courts, prison, which is much more expansive than Beveridge, of course, but how we make them fit for modern purpose and future purpose. How do we future-proof these critically important services? Are there efficiency savings? Can we realign the services in important ways to make sure that the police do what the police should do, that the health service does what the health service should do, that educators are being educated for the job of teaching children from the youngest to the oldest ages in an appropriate, fit-for-purpose modern way in accordance with the modern world that we live in. So these challenges are very significant. We're all feeling the pinch. This is the trouble, isn't it? So if we're serious about this, and I am, of course, declaring interest as a Labour Party member and a councillor, we are, as a UK Labour government, and we want to see this driven, passionate commitment through mission-driven government. Remember, excuse me, Osborne and Gabler, 1992, mission-driven government. I'm changing the world. I'm doing things with energy and drive. I want innovation. I want initiative. I want radical change, rather than bureaucratic, rule-driven government. So this is the context that I want to draw this line at this point from Santa's Grotto. These what is it now over there? These things are appearing around my house. I mean, and I'm not Scrooge, right? I do love it all, but blinking heck, how many lights can you have in one house? So I wanted to do this to move now into the recording for this week, but to say that sometimes when we talk about governance, we can do the governance in isolation to all the other services that we depend upon, that we actually interlink with, and we do a less robust job of governance. So we do have to tick the boxes, of course, for our assignment, corporate governance in policing, but it's very important that we set this challenge in its broader context. So we do work with all of those colleagues I alluded to earlier, whether we know it or not. They all have impact. Numerous colleagues across the public sector, very importantly, numerous colleagues across the private sector, for-profit businesses. They all have interest in our communities as well. And of course, we've got our voluntary sector, charitable colleagues who design and deliver all sorts of services, from the knitting club in the local community centre, sports clubs, football clubs, netball, hockey, cricket, all the rest of it, and then massive infrastructure, and community groups, dance clubs in the local village hall, all that stuff. We're all in it together, I think, is one of the key messages here. All roads lead to home. So when we got that kid, he's a flipping nuisance outside the shops, and we're getting numerous calls. We're getting 4 calls a day, for goodness sake, for these teenagers. And it's that young Mike is the catalyst. He's the one. He's the blinking nuisance. He galvanises everyone, winds them all up. He's always the one that's looking for the alcohol, you know. Where are Mike's buttons? How do we get Mike on board? How do we bring about behaviour change in Mike? And how can we encourage other people to step in a less problematic direction as we go forward? There's lots of hooks into young Mike, some of which are in the gift of the police, most of which are not. So this week we focused on changing governance landscapes. We looked at the Home Secretary's vision for police reform from November 2024, looking ahead to an important white paper in 2025. We touched on in some detail the changing governance landscape, and then we ended up on nudge theory. Changing governance landscape, hugely challenging, hugely complex, and hugely important for the UK government, the new Labour government that we've had in position for a matter of months. What we're seeing is some unpopular decisions coming out of London at the moment, and there were Labour politicians telling us that these are, if in a sense, necessary evils. We have to get the foundation right in order to build for a stronger Britain. That, I think, is fair to say. And what we're seeing is this strong and strident, mission-driven approach. So I want to talk about the changing governance landscape, how things have changed consistently over time, and what kind of challenges we've got to face up to. So when I think about this, I think about, like it's a crossroads there. We carry on going straight ahead, we turn left, we turn right. What are the choices that we make here? And we've made the decision as a country. We've got a Labour government now, and that Labour government is trying to sort of unpick some of the problems of the past, set that foundation strong enough so that we can move forward into a stronger and more confident future. The creation of more jobs, the raising of more tax money, the lowering of unemployment, the development of new industries, the tackling of major problems in the criminal justice system, but of course for us in policing, I mean really smashing some of the biggest issues that we've got. So strong and strident leadership from the centre, from the top of the tree, cascaded throughout the structures that we've got. So there's a number of key areas that I focused on this week, and it is a whistle-stop recording, of course. The links are live on the slide, so please click on them and have a look for yourselves in your own time. So from behave, listen, I'm in charge, I'm telling you, right? I'm controlling you, I'm telling you. There's no choice, there's no debate, there's no discussion. To behaviour change. So that's the first point I'm going to focus on as we go forward here. Think about devolution, politics, class conflict, and then the third rail. So in the first area, we have legislation. So we've got legislation, there's debate, there's discussion. The legislators, the MPs put new law in place, places duties on people, gives people powers in public organisations and so on. And then we have, there we are, look at my muscles, I've got power in law to do certain things. Yeah, okay, that's one thing. But what about the more subtle opportunities that we have to nudge people to behave in a preferable direction? Yeah, all right, we might have the power to arrest for certain things, but is it better for us to arrest whenever people keep shoplifting, or do we nudge people down the road of questioning why they shoplift and not shoplifting anymore? So nudge theory will be looked at the end of this 40-minute session, maybe 40 minutes, maybe less than that. Devolution, so councils and communities. I'm not going to look at that too much. We've done this a number of times already, but I want to make the point that we've got the UK government, we've got regional structures around the UK. Of course, we've got the Welsh government for Wales and our 3.2 million population. And then services are cascaded through local authority structures, through councils, down through very local structures. The impact is that we have the high-level national strategy cascaded through these complex structures all the way down to local dynamic action, and we meet the needs of the people in our communities. In politics, we see voting patterns. We've got a new Labour government in place after what I think it's fair to say turmoil in national politics consistently over time with a series of Conservative prime ministers. A notorious phase in British history, I think it's fair to say. Ideological shift. There's a question mark to be placed here. Have we seen the Labour Party being voted for as a positive, proactive, active step to choose the political leaders we have today? Or has the Labour Party won power because of people's disaffection with the alternatives? Important question. We see the rise of right-wing parties across the world. We see Donald Trump being voted in. People were amazed that he was voted in for one term. People are incredulous that he's been voted in for a second term. People. Hang on, Mike. Who's these people you refer to? Well, what we are thinking about here is, I think, people in the middle of the political spectrum, if you like, I think, why have we gone for such a radical person to lead America? So that relates to the next focus on class conflict, people's frustrations, people feeling a political distance, people from working class communities in particular feeling that the political powers that be have no interest in us anymore. We're irrelevant in the system. Politics is not for me. And if people feel disenfranchised from the political process, they are more susceptible to hear wild claims from populist politicians, and they're more likely to vote for them. Some commentators in America have said that the dividing line, has been Kamala Harris and her lot as degree-educated professionals, and Donald Trump and his lot targeting ordinary, everyday, working-class people. Weirdly, it's crazy, isn't it? A man who is anything but working class, has no values, full stop perhaps, but certainly not working-class values. Neither did his father, but saying things that appeal to that working-class audience. I'm going to make America great again. Yeah! What the heck does that mean? Don't pause, don't reflect, don't think about it, just shout, yeah. I'm going to make Germany great again. Yeah, people go down this kind of route. It works. We can throw a net over people and drag them in the direction we want to drag them into, especially when they feel out on a limb, when they feel hard done by, when their mortgages, when their rent levels, when their gas bills go higher and higher and higher, when there's fewer jobs for them. People become susceptible to extremist ideologies. And this is exacerbated, made much worse if we decide that we're not going to listen to controversial views or probing, challenging questions from working class communities. Grand gagging. So we don't allow nans to say what they think. I'll give you one example of that. I might use two as we go forward, don't know. A student of mine came to me some years ago and she said that she thought her nan might be a racist. I said, why? She was from a village outside a little town called Ammanford in South Wales. The village is called Gwaun Cai Gerwyn. Population, the white population in Gwaun Cai Gerwyn, 99% plus. And Gran was in Gwaun Cai Gerwyn one day and she saw an African lady. Well, the Gran went straight on to her and said, yeah, my name's Mary. What's your name then? Where are you from? Why are you here? What are you? 20 questions. And my student felt that her Gran might be racist because she went on to the African and said, my God, why are you here? And we had a just chat and a debate about it. Well, her Gran struck up a friendship with the African lady. But the idea that her Gran shouldn't have asked questions, even though she was intrigued to see a lady who seemed, completely unique in her experience, because there were no black people in Gwaun Cai Gerwyn at all at the time. So, you don't ask questions, Nan. That kind of mentality in British politics emerged after New Labour. Don't allow ordinary working class people to express themselves, to ask their questions, to become involved with the debate, even if they're going to say controversial things, allow them to say controversial things, but then allow us the opportunity to unpick those controversial things and explore the realities of those questions, those claims, so that we can arrive at a more realistic, stronger foundation and allay people's fears. So if people listen to right-wing politicians saying, that we'd have full employment in Britain if there were no immigrants, well, we pause and reflect on that claim. So if somebody in a community says it, don't tell them not to say it because they could be racist. Say, all right, what do you mean then, Dave? Right, okay, well, what, in your village, in your town, in your community, is this an issue? Are we talking more broadly in Britain? Unpick it carefully and say, right, okay, so your concern is that there won't be any jobs for you or your children if we have a massive influx of people from Afghanistan or Pakistan or Romania. That's my fear, yeah. It doesn't make sense to me that we bring a lot of people in from Romania into the village. They then might be able to take jobs and I end up unemployed. I'm terrified of that. Well, what's the right way to discuss this kind of challenge? I think the right way is to say, do you know what, I'd share your fears as well. It doesn't matter that the people are coming into the village from Romania. They could be coming into our village from the neighbouring village. The fact is that people who've lived here for a long time might be hard done by. I understand that concern. I do. And then we can explain whether his fear is realised, whether the facts back up what he is concerned about or not. Right? He feels engaged with the political process of asking questions and seeking answers and getting those answers. If we don't do that, we're going to hide into nowhere, I think, and other commentators would agree. And we'll talk about Paul Embry quite briefly in a little while. In the context of the third rail, the electric rail and the underground railway system, don't touch it, you're going to die. Well, are we in a context where we've got to grip the third rail, where we've got to focus on radical change, where we've got to think about reimagining government? Moreover, is this the route that the new Labour government in London is going down? Mission-driven government as opposed to bureaucratic, rule-driven government. So there's the Welsh government. I put the cabinet secretaries and ministers there. They exist to design and deliver services for the people of Wales, right? Communities in Wales. Who are these communities? Well, we've got people like me and Suzanne and our family, 5 kids, 9 grandchildren. But at the same time, and I see us as, we're not at the top of society, the great and the good, but we're in that band of people who work, people who earn, people who pay our bills, people who love their children and always try to do the best for them and our grandchildren and so on. People, you could say, people like us in general terms, people who are engaged with the economic, social life of their communities. But we've also got people like this, Frank Gallagher from the British sitcom Shameless. Never worked, never earned, never paid any tax. Always outside the spar shop asking for 50 pence, always shoplifting, always in court, always in the doctors, blinking nuisance, right? Well, all human life is in every community. Well, if we're not trying to engage Frank, along with Mike and Suzanne, about the future of their communities, I think we're doing things wrong. So we need to be considering how we engage more and more people in the democratic process. I'm on a line here now. I'm skirting a line between governance and politics, but I'm going to go in the governance context, of course. It's very important that people are actively engaged to participate in the life of their democracy. So legislation is one thing. It's okay to create acts of parliament, give people duties and powers and all the rest of it in law. Behaviour change is something else. So this is David Halpin. This is his excellent book, Inside the Nudge Unit. I'll talk about that, as I say, as we go forward. The idea is it's not about me telling you to behave. It's not like me being an authoritarian teacher saying, do it like that. It's about me nudging you to do the things that you ought to do. So creating the right circumstances for us to encourage people to step in a positive direction rather than a negative direction. And hopefully this can lead to an improvement in the effectiveness and efficiency of the services we design and deliver. It can lead to an improvement in the cost of public services. It can lead to a lessening in the burden for overburdened public services. As I say, I'll come back to that. So we remember people like Tom Scholar, who was hounded out of his job, as the leading civil servant of his day, as the permanent secretary in the Treasury, hounded out by Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng. This excellent professional civil servant was saying things that the politicians didn't want to hear, so they wanted to get rid of him. They got rid of him. He was bullied and harassed into leaving. Mr. Scholar's not alone. This is Philip Putnam. Philip was bullied and harassed out of his job by the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, and then he had a payment of £340,000. I think it was 2 years' salary, because he was hounded out of his job by that leading politician. We have Gavin Williamson, another Conservative leading politician, conducting himself most unprofessionally in a variety of circumstances. And we have, Dominic Raab. Dominic Raab, when he went back to the Ministry of Justice, filled everybody with absolute horror and fear. They were terrified of him. The Permanent Secretary, Antonio Romeo, had to speak to him and read him the Riot Act. He must treat staff professionally and with respect, because people were so disaffected by the idea of him returning there. Isn't it awful that he could have this culture of fear at the top of government? And the line I've drawn consistently in governance terms is between the politician, the PCC, and chief constables, and as the head of the paid service. It's a critically important role, isn't it? Remember that lovely phrase from the Standards Committee, tone from the top. If you have a bad, poor, cancerous tone from the top, we're not going to have a very positive organisational context at any level. Okay, so when we think about the people of the country, the link is live here to show you an old comedy sketch. All human life is to be found in any community, any town, any suburb of any city. All sorts of people live in communities. So we had the traditional working middle upper class structure in my father's generation. Professor Fiona Devine and her colleagues revisited the British class system in 2013. They surveyed 161,000 people, and they said we need to revisit the class structure that we have, because society has changed so much. The political landscape has changed, transformed in recent decades. So what she looked at was three key areas: economic factors, social factors, and cultural factors. And then she put a system together where she came up with 7 different social classes. She said this was in the middle, which is really interesting and exciting. There's a much more fuzzy area between the traditional working class and the traditional middle class. So big changes there. I'll say about these. I've cut out slides, that's why you see 6 and 7 here. But that link on slide 17 is live for you to actually go through the new British class survey. It's a bit of fun for you to do that and see how you would feature in one of these 7 classes. So what we see when we go through the British class survey results is that we've got 6% of people in the elite category, 25% established middle class. So a third of people, let's round it up, a third of people established middle class and above, a third of people in that middle category, technical middle class to traditional working class, and a third of people in the emergent service worker precariat class. So in some ways we can say, look, the thirds kind of principle continues to apply. But the challenge is that politics has become the preserve of that top third. That's the criticism in America. Look, Kamala Harris, long-standing legal professional. People with degrees. People living in middle-class communities. People talking about progressive politics. People talking about human rights. People talking about fighting for the rights of minority groups and all the rest of it. That's that lot on that side of the line. The other side of the line, what about us? What about working class people living in overcrowded rented accommodation? What about people who can't get well-paid jobs? What about the employment queues? What about our issues? The Gulf opened up. So that's the massive change in the current landscape that we have. Voting patterns. We only had, I think, 60% of people turning out in the general election this year. 60% of people. Now we would expect much more than that. So why not? Why aren't people voting? And again, to reiterate something we've alluded to a number of times, how many people actually turn out and vote for police and crime commissioners? So do they have a political legitimacy in the minds of the people in the country? Does it matter what colour rosettes are? So who do we vote for? You know my political allegiance, of course. Does it matter? Well, it matters before elections when people are arguing for people's votes, but not that much afterwards, because we've got to get on with the jobs in hand in councils and in halls of power, corridors of power. What matters is whether people feel a part of the political process. And I think that's my main area of concern in this context, that we have a large section of the population who feel disenfranchised from a political process that their parents, grandparents and great-grandparents would have felt part of. And what we're talking about is the working class. This is Paul Embry. Labour abandoned the working class, he says. There's a tweet that summarises his perspective. When a British tourist goes into a foreign shop and starts talking more loudly, when it becomes clear the assistant doesn't speak English, the assistant is the British working class, the tourist is the Labour Party. If we shout more loudly at the working class, they will comply with our wishes. We're not listening to them, though. Matter of fact, we can't listen to them because the working class speaks a different language. He wrote a book a few years ago now called, brilliantly, Despised Why the Modern Left Loathes the Working Class. He said, treat people like cattle and you're going to get kicked. So if you don't engage with working class people with open and honest dialogue about their hopes, their fears, their aspirations, their challenges and so on, and then you're on a hide into nowhere, you're going to lose the trust of a huge wedge of the British population. He grew up in Barking and Dagenham, a massive council estate in Essex, and that community has been transformed over the years. A huge amount of immigrants. It's not just over the last 20 years, actually. Barking and Dagenham history goes back over 100 years, and you see transformation in the demographic makeup of those communities in that massive estate. Local people ignored, and we see this, Embry says, over time. Labour politics were rooted in the hopes and fears, the aspirations of working class communities. Labour values were forged literally on the coalface, fighting for the rights and welfare of people, the trade union movement and so on. And the Labour Party became increasingly middle class over time. So by the time we come to New Labour, late 90s, we turn away in Labour politics away from the working classes, away from left-wing thinking, towards London-centred middle-class values. We didn't take the workers with us. So Paul Embry says what that did was it created a gap. It created a gap that's been filled by populist politicians who see that their frustrations in working class communities, people feel ignored, let down, abandoned, and people stepped into that gap. People like, for example, the old far-right political parties, National Front, then the British Nationalist Party, then UKIP, and of course we've seen people like Tommy Robinson come into the fore. I'm listening to you. Nigel Farage, arguably the most successful British politician of the last 2 decades, populist. I'm targeting my message to those people because they've got the power to put a cross in a box. That's all I care about. Remember Gorgias? Remember the Platonic dialogue? It doesn't matter whether it's true, whether it's not. What matters is if they believe me and they give me a vote. Thank you. I win. That's what matters. Trevor Phillips was Tony Blair's appointment as the chair of the Equality and Human Rights Commission in the late 1990s. Did the job, I think, for about 10 years. And he said that liberalism and a fear of offending minorities are stifling legitimate debate. We can't stifle legitimate debate. It's stupid. We shouldn't do it. We should allow people to say what they want, when they want to say it. Stopping short of hate crime, of course. But we should engage people with the debates they want to have. Now, this has laid the ground for Brexit, based on people's frustrations, and the rise of populist leaders like Nigel Farage and Donald Trump. So they've filled the gap left by the Labour Party. When the Labour Party became more middle class, more London centric, there's a big gap left in working class communities. We need to fill that gap. and remember our traditional Labour values. I'm not saying that we'll be leftist and Marxist in our thinking, but I'm saying that we need to have open and honest conversations with ordinary everyday people about their hopes and fears, even if they say controversial things that might appear to be inflammatory or heading in the direction of hate crime. We should engage them and then unpick what they say and how they say it, engage them with a debate, and where we can, give them the facts, give them the figures, give them the reality, and perhaps change their minds to something a bit less negative if there's lots of negativity. In either case, they would feel part of the political process again. Hey, listen, your cross in a box, Frank Gallagher, is worth just as much, completely equal, to my cross in a box in a democracy. But my voice is much louder than yours at the moment. Nobody wants to hear what you say because you say inflammatory things that offend middle-class sensibilities. Very important. Has political correctness gone mad? Now, this isn't some right-winger saying this. This is Trevor Phillips, who is the equalities guru for the UK for such a long time. So we see... I'm flashing this up for you. I didn't do it in class, but I thought I would do now. Portrait of Modern Britain, Ethnicity and Religion. So this was written this year by the Policy Exchange. Very interesting. They asked about what policing priorities should be. In class, I raised a question mark about non-crime hate incidents and whether we should get rid of them. This is that report. Lord Hogan Howe, I think, is referred to in this report as saying, get rid of them, stop them, they're muddying the water. They are diluting police priorities. The police shouldn't be chasing people because Alison Pearson, because she said something which might have been inflammatory in some way. We shouldn't be looking to try to sort of make sure nobody offends anyone else. We don't have the right in law not to be offended. We don't. So what should our priorities be? This report asks, and people responded this. Murder and violent crime, 65% of respondents said that's what the police should be most concerned about. Rape and sexual assault, burglary, robbery, terrorism, online hate crime, not the lower threshold of NCHIs, not the lower of non-crime hate incidents, but online hate. We talk about hate crime, only 7% of people said we should be bothered about such things. Isn't it interesting to see this kind of summary of police priorities? Anyway, I thought I'd flash that up for you. I didn't in class refer to these black slides here, a view from the civil service. For a sustainable future, should we build from the top down or try digging the foundations first? Remember last week I talked about the high-level government civil servants, a civil service report that said, Permanent Secretary said, the way that we respond to ministerial demands is a bit akin to trying to put the coping stones, the fancy stones in a garden wall before we've even dug up the foundations. What I've done is I put these slides here which re-emphasise some of those key points. That's the report, Engagement and Aspiration, Reconnecting Policy Making with Frontline Professionals, a Sunningdale Institute report for the Cabinet Office. Put that on here because I mention it and it's an important area. The last thing I'll refer to here is a former MP Sandy Martin. Policy must be designed with a clear idea about how it's going to be implemented. It's okay having the top of the office thoughts going on. It's okay being the Home Secretary looking at a new future, but how are we going to make this work is the key challenge. If we're not clear about it, then the policy making process would be seriously flawed. A bit like an analogy between the brain and the hands, you know, the signal is sent and the act is carried out. Sandy Martin said this, the only way we, this was in the 2019 election, the only way we, Labour, can be elected now is by lying. Isn't that interesting? So populists lying, Gorgias, the sophists, lie to the people. It doesn't matter. If you win, you win. That's what it is. That's the world we live in. The changing landscape in this context is about ne'er-do-wells, dodgy geezers, blackguards, bad people, liars and cheats rising to the top of British politics and European and global politics because of that gap that's been left by working class communities feeling abandoned. Changing world, but I'm not allowed to express my feeling about my concerns about how the world is changing. So I'll pick up on some of these end slides here. I didn't discuss them in class about community control in the context of community governance. I'll pick them up separately. Okay, timing-wise, Michael? Right, okay, so when we think about nudge theory, the slides are online for you. We're talking about not dictating, not forcing, but encouraging people to behave in a more preferable manner in many different ways. So this is Thaler and Sunstein's Nudge, Improving Decisions About Health, Wealth and Happiness, a 2008 book which helped to bring the theory to prominence. So government bodies want to influence the choices we all make. We want fewer criminals. We want people to pay their bills on time. We want parents to send their kids to school, attendance to go up. We want all those positive things. In what ways do they want to influence us and for what purpose? How do we gently encourage people to make decisions in different circumstances? So they talk about liberal paternalism as a new movement. People should be free to choose. I'm not dictating. I'm not a tyrant. You make up your own minds. But we strive, they say, to design policies that maintain or increase our freedom of choice. Liberal paternalism means liberty preserving. Liberal paternalists want to make it easy for people to get their own way. They don't want to burden those who want to exercise their own freedom. The paternalistic aspect lays in the claim that it's legitimate for these choice architects to try to influence people's behaviour in order to make their lives longer, healthier and better. How do we encourage people to stop smoking? How do we encourage people to become healthier? How do we encourage people to drink less? And so on. We steer people's choices. There's lots of evidence to suggest that people make bad decisions. So we want to encourage people to make better decisions, to make their lives better. We don't want to force them to do it by ramping up the power of the nanny state. We want to nudge people in a preferable direction. So the basic principle of choice architecture, as they call it, choosers are humans, so designers should make life as easy as possible. In the modern context, the state should aim to step away from the tendency to force people to do what it wants and to coerce. So in environmental protection, family law and social choice, better governance requires less in the way of government coercion and constraint and more in the way of freedom to choose. We're not for bigger government, they say on page 15 of their book, just for better governance. So we see major steps in this direction over time. Okay, so Cass Sunstein's friend from the Chicago Law School helped him out here. If you're going to have a friend at university, no better friend to have. And so he had a significant role in the White House Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs. This led to links with the UK coalition government under David Cameron, and they set up the BIT, the Behavioural Insights Team. And the Behavioural Insights Team was set up under the auspices of David Halpern. Halpern gave 4 nudge examples in a meeting, highest level meeting with permanent secretaries in Whitehall. Most people pay their tax on time. Just that statement on the HMRC website increased people's payment of their taxes by a few percentage points, which brought in an additional tens of millions of pounds. Just that statement. Most people pay their tax on time. Pressed a button in people's minds and say, I'm that person. I identify with that person who pays my bills on time. I'm paying it today. Tens of millions of pounds extra was nudged into the government coffers. Loft insulation. Government found people weren't insulating their lofts because of the hassle of clearing their lofts before they put the insulation down. So they developed an anti-clearance scheme that people could pay for to clear the antics, and there was a 3 times improvement in the uptake as a result of removing that problem. Motoring fines. Government found that a picture of your vehicle when a fine is sent out to you made you much more likely to pay unpaid car tax. So people send you a picture of your car. When we had car tax discs, people would see your car go, bloody hell, pay it. It's definitely me. Rather than arguing against it. I can't argue against that. It's definitely my car. Court fines. If we send a text saying bailiffs are coming, then we double the rate of fine payment. So the government gave Halpin and his team some significant challenges. Like, if it works, we'll keep funding it. If it doesn't, we'll pull the plug on it. And it worked. So they went down the route of looking at ways that we can nudge people to improve their behaviours. Some examples from Halpin. West Germany in 1980 made the wearing of helmets compulsory. This, strangely, saw a reduction of 60% in the reduction of motorbike theft. People stealing motorbikes. They could just walk down the road, see a motorbike, jump on it, steal it. No helmets required. And when helmets were required, it meant if you were a motorbike thief, you had to take a helmet with you. Otherwise, the police would pull you over. So, an unintended consequence. People were nudged in that direction, accidentally. If we, I'm not going to pick on all of these, people's behaviour, suicide, for example, North Sea gas changes. Previously, gas was poisonous, so a common way to kill yourself was to stick your head in an oven, put the gas on, the gas would kill you. North Sea gas came online after 1963. It would make you feel ill, make you sick, but it wouldn't kill you. So suicide rates went down. Removing the hassle of an additional click to fill in a tax form. So the improvement in completing tax forms of 22%. Reducing suicide rates. Put limits on the amount of tablets you can buy. So you can't go in a shop and buy boxes and boxes of paracetamol. There's limits that you can buy. Small numbers meant that people go off. It's not going to kill you. Might make you ill. But not going to die from that overdose. Rather than buy 200 in a bottle. Making suicide easier. Pop-out packs. Really difficult. Poke them out, poke them out, poke them out. If you want to take 50 tablets from a bottle, you could just sort of drink them almost. But poking them out, if you're drunk and you're suicidal, well, by the time you get through 10 tablets, you're fed up with popping them out, you fall asleep in the settee instead of going through with it. So we see that making things difficult, nudging people through creating hassles for ourselves can bring about behaviour change. If you love chocolate, you're eating chocolate all the time, well, don't have it on the coffee table. Don't put it where you see it. Put it in a tin, on a shelf, out the way. Don't buy it. It's not there. You won't eat it. Hopeless at saving. Transfer money on a monthly basis into an account that you don't have access to. Okay. So, public information films. A few links here. Very interesting. We used to have a lot of them. Don't have so many of them now. Expensive things to do. And we see, my example I gave you, skydiving, absolutely terrified of skydiving. It was bought for me as a Christmas present by family members who clearly don't like me because I hate heights. But I knew, I nudged myself to do it by kidding myself, by psychologically tricking myself. And what I did was I said, at some point on that Sunday, my feet will be on the ground again and I will have done a skydive. That's what I did. It worked brilliantly. And I'm never going to do it again. Soldiers don't fight for money. They fight for honour. I think the last thing I'd say in this context really is that we are surrounded by nudges in so many different ways. Club cards. There was a point in time when I'd do anything for a club card. Point. Nudging you. If you use Tesco, get points. Yes. God, I'm not going anywhere else, psychologically. So how do we get people to step in the right direction that we want to step in? How do we tap into human traits of collaboration and cooperation? How do we encourage people to do these things? How can we encourage people to behave better, less antisocial behaviour, less criminal behaviour, and so on? So the genius ideas I finished off with here, I think the genius ideas anyway, ethnic minority police applicants, to try to tackle a lack of engagement and success for ethnic minority applicants. There was a gap in the performance of ethnic minority applicants compared to other applicants. Halpin refers at page 137 in his book to this confusion over why there was a gap. Was it mastery of English? Was it cognitive abilities? What was going on? So they focused on the motivation to apply, tapping into collaboration, cooperation and community. So the extra line to the email instructions for the online exam was to ask applicants to think about why they wanted to apply and why it mattered to their communities. That resonated with the applicants, and the ethnic minority pass rate went from 40 to 60%, entirely eliminating the difference with white applicants. This is quite an interesting thing, isn't it? How do we push the buttons of the people that we want to engage? And the very final thing that I refer to here, great example, Schiphol Airport. These examples here. Excuse me. So Schiphol Airport had a big problem with urine in the men's toilets on the floor. Lots of cleaning had to be done consistently because men are distracted. The urinals are big enough, but they'd still miss. So somebody had the genius idea of sticking a little sticker of a fly in the urinal in a hope that men, tapping into the psychology of men, would aim at the fly. So that's what they did. And the cleaning costs were reduced very dramatically as a result. A very simple nudge, but very effective, saved the airport lots of money in cleaning. Don't mess with Texas. People chuck in their rubbish, fast food litter, whatever else. That phrase, don't mess with Texas. Lovely, stickers. That's me. I'm not the kind of guy to mess with Texas. It's my community, and so on. Tying into that identity. I love New York, the most famous example of all, really, trying to give New York this kind of feeling of togetherness, of community spirit, of a destination of choice and all the rest of it. I heart New York. Hugely popular and hugely powerful.